Color Commentary. This is Mike. I'm getting married on June 20th, and as a result, I won't be able to record this podcast for a couple weeks. So this is pre-recorded so we can keep the content you love coming to you on a schedule. And now into the show.
Yeah, I mean, they're not going to know the difference. You guys don't know the difference. Mike's been here all along. We're from the future.
We are. We have all sorts of portentous knowledge.
Yeah, we had a little spy go out for us, you might say.
Yep. So, as you might guess, obviously since we're recording this in bulk, I don't have another F&M to talk about. You don't have another F&M to talk about. We could completely lie and make up events that never happened, but,
It's lame.
Yeah, I don't feel the need for that. So, we're going to get into deck tech, and what deck did we get sent?
We got sent a deck called One Land Spy.
Hoo boy, did we ever! This is Pauper's, resident, Dark Horse combo deck. I think the best comparison would be Belcher in Legacy.
Yes,
Goblin Charbelcher.
Yeah, it's a deck that essentially runs one land and land grant, and you tutor the one land and you have a card called Balustrade Spy where you mill the cards in your deck until you hit a land. So the thing that makes it different from Goblin Charbelcher is that Goblin Charbelcher will win you the game on the spot, right? It's going to deal damage equal to the number of cards you reveal. Yeah, and this deck, though, it gets a little tricky. After your whole deck is gone, you still gotta do some things.
Okay. So the most common version I see of this list runs a card called Haunting Misery main deck. It's 1 and 2 black. Then you exile X cards from your graveyard, deal X damage to target creature or player. And the idea here is you're going to turn your whole deck upside down into your graveyard, and then you're going to Haunting Misery for lethal. This one uses a slightly different win con, but oh my god, we actually just sat here for 15 minutes watching videos of how this deck plays just so that we could actually discuss it with some level of competency.
It's weird because it's a Belcher deck, but it's not a very streamlined Belcher deck, right?
The main issue is the fast mana in Pauper isn't as good as Chrome Mox.
Yeah, I mean the deck has to run Lotus Petal and Tinderwall.
And Simeon's Spirit Guide, it runs Songs of the Damned, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual. But okay. So God, this is just
it's a pile.
Someone was eventually going to have us talk about this list, so I'm kind of glad we're getting it out of the way now.
How did anyone even invent this list? That's what I want to know. If you invented this list, please come forward. We would love to talk to you about it, because like I said, I don't think it's particularly good, but there are so many moving parts in this. Someone had to sit down and think this up. This
is the goddamn Rube Goldberg machine of our format. These are. Let me look through this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards in here that I see that get played, and one of them is a forest. I don't know. It's just, this is 100% the biggest Pauper underdog I have ever seen, and ever since I heard about it, I've been baffled at its existence. All right, let's get into this, because this is going to take a while for us to get through. Okay, so creatures. We're going to start off with 4 of the titular Spy, Balustrade Spy. Its body doesn't matter. It is 3 and a black. Target player mills cards off their library until they hit a land.
And this was actually really good when you did it to your opponent back in Gatecrash.
Yeah,
Limited.
Yeah.
This was a great card in Gatecrash Limited.
So this is the enabler that lets you take your deck and flip it over and put it into your graveyard. I say the body doesn't matter because if you're ever attacking with this, things have gone horribly wrong and you're probably losing the match.
Yeah, because you've milled your whole deck, you're probably losing the next upkeep.
Yep. It runs 1 copy of Blood Celebrant. Blood Celebrant is a 1/1 for black. It has the ability black, pay 1 life, add a mana of any color to your mana pool. This is for fixing into off-color cards. Mm-hmm. We've got Dimir Houseguard.
A 1 of Dimir Houseguard.
Yep. 3 and a black. It is a 2/2 that regenerates by sacking a creature. That bit doesn't matter. It transmutes for 1 and 2 black. So pay 1 and 2 black, search your library for a card with the same converted mana cost, put it into your hand, transmute only as a sorcery.
And that card is Balustrade Spy.
Yep, lets you get the spy into hand. 1 Disciple of the Vault, 1/1 for 1 black. Whenever an artifact leaves the battlefield and goes to your graveyard, target opponent loses a life.
Whenever an artifact goes to the graveyard from the battlefield, important distinction.
Yes. So it doesn't trigger off discards. 1 of Ethereum Sculptor, 1 in a blue for a 1/2 artifact spells you cast cost 1 colorless less to cast. Excuse me, 1 generic.
Yeah.
I gotta remember that we can't say colorless anymore.
We're contractually obligated not to, in fact.
1 of Salvage Scout. Let me look this
one
up.
I actually did look it up. It's white for a 1/1 whose ability is white. Sacrifice Salvage Scout to return an artifact from your graveyard to your hand.
Okay. So we got that. We got 4 Simian Spirit Guides. The text on Simian Spirit Guide does not matter, except for the fact that you can exile it from your hand to add a red to your mana pool. It's fast mana. Street Wraith, again, the text doesn't matter besides pay 2 life, cycling. So
pay 2 life, draw a card.
Yeah. It's a concession that you can't run 8 Gitaxian Probes, basically.
Yes.
4 Tinderwalls. Tinderwall is 1 green. Sacrifice it. You get 2 red.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can just kind of say that the bodies here don't matter.
Yeah, the bodies here
care.
by and large don't matter. The bodies are either fast mana or they're winning you the game.
Yeah. 4 Wild Canter. Wild Canter is a hybrid red or a green for a creature that you can sack and add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Okay, so lots of fast mana.
We haven't even gotten to the instants and sorceries yet.
Yep. So we're going in deeper. We got 2 Cabal Rituals, which is 1 and a black, add 3 black to your mana pool. If you have Threshold, 7 or more cards in graveyard, you add 5 black instead. Should be pretty easy with a deck that turns its library into its graveyard. We got 4 Dark Rituals, the classic alpha to current day kind of. 1 black, add 3 black to your mana pool. We got 4 Manamorphos, 1 a hybrid red-green, add 2 mana of any color to your mana pool, draw a card.
So it's double duty.
It cycles, it fixes. A 1x of Reaping the Graves. And Reaping the Graves, let me just double check a mana cost on this thing. Reaping the Graves is a storm card. It is one of our storm cards that is not actually banned. Most storm cards got banned pretty quickly for this format. Mm-hmm. So Reaping the Graves is 2 and a black, instant, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and it has Storm. So you copy it for each spell you've already played this turn, right? Then we got 4 Songs of the Damned, 1 black, add a black to your mana pool for each creature in your graveyard.
So that's pretty good.
It's pretty good once you've got the 25 creatures in your graveyard, right? 1 black mana, add 24 black, seems reasonable. We got 2 Destroy the Evidence, 4 and a black, destroy target land, and then it does the mill thing where it mills until it hits a land. Redundancy for Balustrade Spy. 4 Gitaxian Probe, pay 2 life, draw a card, look at your opponent's hand, which usually translates to pay 2 life, learn what you're going to be losing against, and draw a card.
Yep.
Like, if you get Gitaxian Probe and they reveal a hand that indicates they're playing blue at all, it's just like, alright, well, we could go to game 2. 4 Land Grant. Land Grant is the other crucial part of this deck. You're running 1 land, right? And you really need it out of your deck. Land Grant is 2 and a green, search your library for a forest, put it into your hand. It does have an alternate mana cost, though, alternate casting cost, rather, of reveal your hand.
If you have no lands in hand.
If you have no lands in hand, and you're good. So this is to make sure that forest isn't in there, so, you know, when you Balustrade Spy, you get the whole deck instead of half of it.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 2 Morgue Theft. This is another one I'm going to have to look up, because I was playing in Odyssey, and I don't remember this. I know that it's Odyssey, but Morgue Theft, I believe, is a Raise Dead effect.
I think it has flashback.
It has flashback, which is the important part. Yes, it flashes back for 4 and a black. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is kind of redundancy with Reaping the Graves. If you don't have the Reaping the Graves in your hand, when you do the full mill, you can flashback Morgue Theft. We've got the land base, a single forest. Risky, bold decision, but necessary.
Mm-hmm. It's not even an island.
Yeah, because Land Grant only gets forests.
I know.
Artifacts, we got 8 in here. And they are comprised of 4 Lotus Petals, so 0 mana, pop it, get 1 mana of any color.
More
more
fast
mana. And 4 Conjurer's Bauble. Conjurer's Bauble is the crux of this version of it. It's 1 mana, tap, sacrifice it, put a card on the bottom of your library, draw a card. Put a card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library, draw a card.
So what we have here then is we have a deck that mills itself completely out with Balustrade Spy, uses cards like Morgue Theft or Reaping the Graves to return Disciple of the Vault and Ethereum Sculptor to the battlefield, and then uses Conjurer's Bauble to make an endless loop of damage where you sack the Conjurer's Bauble, put the Conjurer's Bauble back on top of your library, draw the Conjurer's Bauble, and then play it again and again until your opponent is dead.
Technically, you do need 2 Conjurer's Baubles because the Conjurer's Bauble targets before it hits the graveyard. Not a problem when you're turning your deck upside down. So the lines here are like so incredibly sketchy. This seems like one of those decks where mulligans could be what you lose to. Like, if you don't get a good hand where you can like ramp the mana up, hit the Balustrade Spy, mill yourself, and get back what you need.
In the videos we watched one with Magic Gathering Strat Season 2 of Pauper Gauntlet. And he lost to not being able to draw any any spy effect.
Yeah, like, this is definitely a deck where, you know, if you open the God Hand, which I'm not even going to try and figure out what the God Hand is for this deck.
I imagine it's some amount of fast mana and Balustrade Spy.
But then you also need, you're also going to need a Conjurer's Bauble. Because if you don't have the 1 Conjurer's Bauble, you can't get it back. You need, maybe you need, God... This is my problem with the deck. I'm having to sit here and piece this together.
I don't even know what Elvish Aberration is in the sideboard for. I guess it cycles for a forest?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess. So the main idea is the board state to win here is you're going to want the Ethereum Sculptor and the Disciple in play.
Yes.
And you're going to loop the Conjurer's Bauble. You've got no real blue sources, so you need some sort of fixing for that. So I think the ideal is, you know, you have Reaping the Graves in hand on the turn you go off. You cast a bunch of stuff. You Reaping the Graves, getting back, like, Blood Celebrant, and then Ethereum Sculptor, Disciple of the Vault, and maybe a couple Wild Cantors. And you go... And you have a ton of black mana floating. Hopefully from, like, a couple Songs of the Damned. So you're at, like, 30, 40 mana. You don't care. And then you're going to use Blood Celebrant to filter into the blue to cast the Ethereum Sculptor. You burn your 1 black to, you know, get the Disciple of the Vault. And... God.
But also, unlike Charbelcher, this deck can't kill you on turn 1.
It can't turn 1, I don't think. I don't think there's a combination of fast mana in this deck that lets you get to that point. So you're going to need at least 5 on the turn you go off, right? You need the Balustrade Spy to mill you, that's 4. And you need 1 black for preferably Songs of the Damned. And from that point, I think you're good. So wait, hold on. Songs of the Damned, Balustrade Spy. You need a Conjurer's Bauble. That's 3 cards.
You need a Land Grant or the Forest.
Yeah, Land Grant or Forest. That's 4. Wild Canter to fix your mana. That's 5.
Lotus Petal.
Lotus Petal. So that way you're going Wild Canter.
Yeah, you're...
Oh, no. You want Lotus Petal and...
Dark Ritual? Yeah, you need some sort of ritual.
And does that work? Does that get you the turn 1? I don't know.
Because you'd go...
Oh, no, you still need a... You still really want that Reaping the Graves. God, this is...
Yeah, this deck is well...
I think you can turn 2 with it, though. I think you get that 8th card. Or if you're on the draw, I guess, and you know, have the luck of the gods behind you, and, you know, just...
And it's not... You didn't lose the first game, and your opponent didn't go turn 1 Relic.
Yeah. That's the other thing. Hoo boy!
Yeah, this deck just auto-loses to Relic, basically, right?
Actually, it has an even worse time against... not to harp on it, but Nihil Spellbomb, because that does not cost mana to activate.
It's true. You only need the mana to draw you the card.
Yep. So if at any point your graveyard gets exiled, you're just absolutely boned.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think the best point to do that would be in response to the Songs of the Damned. If you're playing against this.
Oh yeah, just as soon as you can do it. Songs of the Damned isn't an instant, is it? Oh, it is.
It is. A lot of this.
But it
list
doesn't
is
matter
against
if they have all that mana and they can't do anything with it.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I think that. Well, they don't even get any mana from Songs of the Damned if you exile the graveyard.
Well, if they Songs of the Damned in response.
Oh, true.
If they have extra black mana floating, it just doesn't matter. They can't.
They could actually.
Oh, Reaping is an instant. Ooh.
Reaping is an instant. But then unless you have the Salvage Scout out already and a way to convert to white mana, you can't get back the Conjurer's Bauble, and you actually need.
Yeah, it's a very tough proposition.
This is infuriating. Like, oh man, as I said, I'm glad we got this out of the way. Now here, let's get spicier. The sideboard has a different win con. It boards into the Haunting Misery version. And it also runs Flaring Pain.
I was going to say, this deck actually doesn't need Flaring Pain.
It does. Haunting Misery deals damage.
Okay, well, in that alternate win con, yes, but Disciple of the Vault causes life loss.
Yes. And that is what I think gives this a leg up over the more traditional version of One Land Spy. The fact that you're not getting as hosed by a fog, you're not getting as hosed by Cop Black.
No one plays that, though. I wouldn't play Cop Black. Even if this deck was in our meta, I wouldn't play Cop Black. I just don't care.
And the other thing that's very interesting is the Haunting Misery plan actually has a cap on how much damage it can deal, right?
You said it's like 23 or something?
24. Okay. So if you have no creatures in hand when you Balustrade Spy, there's going to be 23 creatures in the graveyard. Or 24, sorry. Mm-hmm. That means if... Actually, wait. Oh, no, because you probably side out of the Disciple... Oh no, you have to leave the Disciple in there and the Ethereum Sculptor because otherwise you can't deal enough damage. Oh god, why?
Why?
Oh,
why
man.
do you hate us?
It does run 4 Ingot Chewers though to deal with Graveyard Hate because it is a 1 mana removal spell.
Yeah, sure, a 1 mana sorcery speed removal spell that kills an artifact that was already going to be sacrificed. Like I don't know.
God, this is
Pyroblast.
It runs 3 Pyroblast as a concession to the fact that 2 islands is the deck's second worst enemy after Mulligan. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like you can't Mulligan too low on this, otherwise you're just not going to get there by nature of not having enough cards to likely draw into the land grant. Like there's a certain point where you just have to say like I can't Mulligan into a better hand. I think this is a deck that is very interesting from a scholarly standpoint, as like a game mechanic standpoint.
Yeah, and like a good thought exercise. Like all these seemingly disparate cards do work together to produce something that could resemble a win sometimes.
But that's the thing. How many clarifiers did you have in there to say this might work? It's not just it might work. It might work sometimes if the opponent doesn't have these answers, and if I draw perfectly, and you just keep tacking on the ands.
I don't know if we're coming across here that we're not really big fans of this deck.
I think it's clear.
I think there will be a rebrew about it, though. I mean, this is about as brewy as you can get, right?
Oh God, do we want to play this? Like,
I think we owe it to our fans, our constituents, and the audience.
I'm just gonna sit there and it's gonna make my brain hurt. This is like, I am not a combo player.
We're elected officials, Mike. We have to stand by our constituents on this one.
Like, I guess part of this is the fact that I will never be a combo player.
I am not a combo player either.
I especially these all-in many moving parts, just because the games where you win probably look very similar. Like, this deck does have 1 win con main deck. It has 1 win con sideboard. There are 2 ways this deck can win. To me, personally, I don't find a lot of interest in that. Because, the games are going to kind of look the same against the same archetype, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to have a hard time against Delver game 1. You're going to probably have a decent chance against Tron, unless they can get the Fengraf out before you combo. Oh, yeah, I just realized you sacrificed an artifact to loop this.
Yep, goodbye.
This actually just straight up folds to a Fangren Marauder.
But then you have the Haunting Misery combo in the board, so... You know, this board is actually kind of interesting. So on the board we have a Deemer House Guard, I guess with another tutor effect. We have an Elvish Apparition, which seems weird. It can go get the Forest, but I'm not sure why you would need a 5th copy of that effect.
Especially one that costs mana.
Yeah, we have a 1 of Flaring Pain to go with the Haunting Misery. We have 3 Fogs and a Spore Frog, I guess is a concession to aggro. We have 4 Ingot Chewers, which builds up both your Songs of the Damned count, and like Mike said, could help deal with problematic graveyard hate. And we have 3 Pyroblasts, which I assume are in here to protect the combo.
Yep. God. So this reminds me, do you remember last year there was a period where there was another deck featuring Songs of the Damned that got a couple of good results? Do you remember that list?
No. I mean, it sounds familiar.
Okay, so they played... Their creature base was basically the creature base from Living End in Modern. All of the 1 mana or free cyclers from Alara block. And what it did was it cycled a bunch of cards, it drew a bunch of cards, and then its win con was either I cast an absurdly large Drain Life from Songs of the Damned, or I just cast a bunch of these big fatties. And I think it also ran in a couple of copies of Exhume, so that it could just Exhume like a 5/6 and bash in.
I seem to remember you talking about it, but I don't think I've ever actually seen the deck.
I played against it once in paper, and it seemed interesting. It, again, it just folded to 2 untapped islands a lot of the time, but even that feels more like... Because that had multiple angles of attack within the deck. Like, you could go for, like, I'm going to exhume a big fat creature and hopefully get there with it. Or, I think in the board that thing ran Gurmag Anglers. So it could just cycle a bunch of stuff into an early Angler as, like, a win con. Like, it had other angles of attack, whereas this is very, very all-in as a combo deck. So, there's a reason One Land Spy doesn't show up on the MTG Goldfish standings.
Correct.
It's too matchup dependent, I feel.
Yeah, I mean...
We talked about it, though. We got a deck that comes up not infrequently, not super infrequently, not never, in discussion. And, we covered it. And I think that this version is interesting over the more traditional version. And I like the fact that it does use that Disciple of the Vault Ethereum Sculptor Conjurer's Bauble loop. I think that is super interesting. And it does mean that you do have reach past the 24 damage that the regular version can do.
Yeah, so wouldn't recommend playing it even as a combo player. I wouldn't recommend playing this deck. I think you'll be sorely disappointed.
You just got back Peregrine Drake, too. You just got back Familiars. Please love yourself. Play a combo deck that wins.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really into Charbelcher style decks, sure, try it out.
We have a local player, Jack, who plays Charbelcher in Legacy, and he won't touch this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pretty bad.
He plays a rickety combo deck in a format with Force of Will, and he won't touch this list.
Goblin Charbelcher is a hilarious deck.
It is.
The idea of all these goblins throwing themselves at you.
Well, you saw the new art for EMA, right? With him shoveling a Black Lotus and a Stormcrow into it.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta look at that.
No, it was a cute little shout out. I forget who illustrated the new version, but it's a goblin in front of a cannon, scooping junk into it, and among the junk there's clearly a Black Lotus. There's what the illustrators confirmed to be a Stormcrow.
Oh, I missed that.
And there's a stick of dynamite and some other stuff. But Belcher is a funny deck to see go off. And this is very much in the vein of Belcher. I think it is less consistent. I think it has way too many moving parts. I think it suffers against hand attack. It suffers against counter magic. It's just... Also, we have fast aggro decks in this format. We do have non-insignificant threats that even a Fog might not deal with. Because they're running Flaring Pain in the sideboard. Any, Kiln Fiend deck also runs Flaring Pain. Boggles runs Flaring Pain.
It's a good card.
I don't know. I thank people for sending in these lists, that we might not otherwise talk about. I know that we have the name of who sent this in written down, and we should thank them by name.
Yes.
It was Raja James. Thank you for sending this in.
Oh, Raja James is, man, thank you, Raja. You're a good guy. You've commented on a few of our videos. We really appreciate you following us.
Yes,
we really appreciate the deck submission.
We appreciate this. If this is what makes you happy as a player, go for it. I look at this, it looks like a pile of cards. I understand in principle how the combo works, but this just isn't for me, and I think it's too fragile for most metas.
He's on Moto. Let's try it out sometime, man.
Yeah, no, listen, if you want to get in contact with us, we can give you a Moto screen name where we can play you, and if you want to show us up, go for it.
Yes, please. I would love to be shown up.
I am willing to be as humble as humanly possible. If we ever review a deck you send in and we kind of trash talk it, please show us. I want to see this deck work. That's my big thing. I'd rather see something cool and lose a game online than never see that cool thing happen.
Exactly. And that actually dovetails pretty nicely into our next topic for the day.
Yep. Alright, so our next topic of discussion for the day is going to be brewing. And namely, is Pauper actually a good format to brew in?
And I know we sell it like that to people, but it remains unconvincing.
Okay, so I'm very much of the opinion that, this is a format where you can brew. I'm also the opinion that it is a very tricky format to brew for.
Yes, the cards are so old, the cards are so powerful. Some of them are just going to be, like we discussed, and I think our first episode, some of them are going to be irreplaceable. Like, this card does this, and either you use this card or you use something suboptimal.
Alright, so for example, you are loyal to your affinity list. I've seen you play a couple other things. I've seen you play, in one of our leagues, you played, what was it? In the finals, you played Affinity, you played Elves, and you played Mono Black?
Disclaimer, we were forced to bring 3 decks.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't let me just change one card and submit it as a new deck.
Yes. Yes. The idea was to foster diversity in the finals instead of just one deck. But, regardless, you have very steadfastly stuck by a defined archetype that you really enjoy, and I'm not here to fault you for that. I am here, however, to present the case for brewing.
Dun dun dun.
Okay, so we have a super developed meta, right? How many new decks crop up? Like
totally new decks.
Totally new decks? Pretty slim. We've kind of hit the point where we may have examined every corner of Pauper, but I think there's still room for new takes on things. Maybe not whole new archetypes that crop up. Although with EMA, there's talks that Zoo might be an actual deck. I don't think it is. I still think Curd Ape is subpar and unimpressive in this format.
Yeah.
I've talked with a couple people about the idea of an Enchantress deck using Yavimaya Enchantress and Aura Narlid in combination with a bunch of sweet value enchantments. And then a Heliod's Pilgrim toolbox. It's not quite there.
There's no common card draw Enchantress effect.
No, there isn't. And that is a big thing holding the deck back. But, so, I think that despite the super developed meta, despite the fact that, there are the best decks of the format. Like Delver, Affinity, Mono Black, Boggles, Stompy, Burn. Those are always going to be standbys. Unless something radically changes the format and we get a bunch of bannings, I think those are always going to be part of the meta. So, I think I could compare it best to Legacy brewing, where when you start brewing in Legacy, you've really got to take stuff into consideration. If you want to play just a strictly beat-down Stompy deck, you almost inevitably wind up playing the Chalice of the Void and Soul Lands combo. Mm-hmm. The Soul Lands like Ancient Tomb or City of Traders, just so you can get that Chalice on one, turn one. And that's like a concession you gotta make. Like, if you want to play a fair deck in Legacy, you've got to do stuff to deal with the unfair things that happen in Legacy. Like Brainstorm. Like a patently amazing card. So I guess my big argument is that you just have to think differently about brewing in this format.
Well, yeah, I guess to bolster your point, take a look at a deck like Snogo, which just took an extremely good card, Mystical Teachings, and applied it a completely different way.
Yes. And I think even more so than just taking a deck and adapting it is we have kind of these chunks of cards that we know synergize well. Like, no matter how little I appreciate a kitty deck, I understand that the synergy is there between a Skyfisher and an Ichor Wellspring. I can't deny that. Like, there's that synergy. And that's 8 cards. And you can kind of take that and then you can kind of attach little different modules onto it and come up with something new. So, I think selling it as a brewer's format where you can just come in and play whatever the hell you want is false. I think that's patently false. I think, if you're a mono blue deck and you're running a bunch of instant sorceries and Delver's not in there, I think that's almost 9 times out of 10 a mistake. Just because that card is so good. And I feel like there are certain decisions that kind of get made for you, where, yeah, you could play this card, but there's just a better version of it that exists. So, I mean, you as someone who's long enfranchised as playing a Tier 1 deck versus me who, I play Tier 2 decks, I play Rogue Brews, I play, lists that I find online where someone's like, would this work? I'm like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I'll show up at F&M and play 4 rounds of this and decide whether it's garbage or not. So what is your view on brewing within this format? And be totally honest. I'm not going to take offense here.
I think I agree with what you said. You can take existing packages and sort of modularize them into different decks, but we're not looking at a deck that's going to be like the next one land spy where it does something like totally off the wall and like is super crazy.
100%. Yeah.
Because whenever you're brewing, you're going to have to take into effect Counterspell and Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, I mean, Counterspell and Lightning Bolt are probably 2 of the best examples of cards where you just have to kind of say, all right, those certainly exist. And can my deck play with them?
I'm not saying that, like I consider my Affinity deck to be extremely personal and, like, very personalized. Even, in a lot of elements of it, it's a deck that's very dear to me, and I've altered cards, I'm foiling it out. And that being said, what I'm getting at here is there are, you can tweak Tier 1 decks very well in this format. You know? So even a deck like Mono Blue Delver, where you think maybe you couldn't do that, I would argue that you can, because the sideboard is up for interpretation. Delver actually has a lot of sideboard options.
Oh, yeah. There's so many, weird, interesting counter spells. I've seen people running Disrupt, which is 1 blue, counter an instant or sorcery unless its controller pays 1. So it's a force spike for instants and sorceries, but it cantrips.
That's pretty good. And the card I was thinking of specifically is Serrated Arrows, because not everyone plays that, and that card's awesome. So you can I think you can nuts and bolts your deck very easily for a lot of even the Tier 1 decks. I think I'm going to hate to say it, I think Standard is just the best brewer format.
Standard?
Because you're constantly trying to stay one step ahead of the meta. When you're playing a deck, a format like any other format, like Modern, Legacy, or Pauper, you have to take into account that these are non-rotating formats and that there is an established metagame, which is going to be much more difficult to disrupt, barring something. So the most recent disruptive thing that happened in these other formats is that Eldrazi got printed.
Yes.
Right?
Oh boy.
And suddenly this whole new archetype sprang up. They don't print cards like that at Common, really. So it's very hard to just come up with a brand new archetype or new cards that suddenly synergize with these existing commons.
Yes, I 100% agree because, Wizards has changed what is common. we don't get Brainstorm at common. We literally just had a set where Brainstorm was an uncommon. Like, EMA put it at an uncommon.
And I believe was it also in Conspiracy, or was it a common there?
It was a common in Conspiracy.
Okay.
But, Brainstorm is now an uncommon power spell. A lot of cards that were common at their time, we've discovered are just too good at that level. Like, I believe I once saw someone ask Mark Rosewater on Twitter, like, was Delver's Secrets a mistake? And he said, flat out, yes.
And I mean, mistakes like that are going to happen. And so that Delver's actually an interesting case here. That card is really not that old. It's like Innistrad. It's only maybe like 4 years old. A little more than that.
I mean, what is one thing that we always think about when, you're looking at a deck, like for one of our deck techs? Fate Reforged was like a year ago, dude. And Gurmag Angler is still one of those things where you gotta kind of be like, what do I do against Angler?
Well, but my argument here was that Angler didn't invent a whole new archetype like Delver did. Like, suddenly, Mono Blue was a Delver deck. Like, all these decks are Delver decks. And it's like Delver maybe didn't invent that archetype, but it certainly is like the keystone of it now. And I don't think Gurmag Angler shares that same distinction.
How about this? How about Grey Merchant? Grey Merchant fundamentally changed how Mono Black played.
Okay, so here's how I think that is more likely to happen, where new cards will be used and quote-unquote brewed into existing decks, and then those cards, if they're good enough, will fundamentally change the deck. So if you consider that brewing, I think this is a fine format. If you want to try and invent a new deck, I think that's going to be very difficult to do in Pauper. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I definitely can get behind that.
Yeah. Because, Grey Merchant radically changed... We've talked about this before about Oubliette. Grey Merchant radically changes the way that Mono Black is played. And now it's hard to imagine that deck without
Gary.
Yeah, or even Gurmag Angler. And like I just said, those creatures are even more recent than Delver.
Well, so I think the big thing is a lot more of the cards that change how our format plays are things that Wizards now identifies as probably were a mistake to print at common. And not even for our format, because Wizards kind of pays attention to Pauper. They don't pay a whole ton of mind.
Well, they don't test for Legacy and Modern with these cards. They certainly don't test for Pauper.
Oh no! I would be surprised if anyone ever says, "What would the ramifications of shifting this to Common be for Pauper?"
No, and that's actually kind of interesting because as we're discussing this, we keep going back to Peregrine Drake just got reprinted, and that's got people a brewing. You know?
Yeah. Someone did actually ask, I think it was Matt Tabak or one of the other rules managers, about Peregrine Drake, and explicitly asked, was this downshifted to common for Pauper? And they said, and whoever it was just said, no. Flat out, no. We do not test for Pauper. We just basically run analysis every so often to see if something's a problem, like Cloud of Fairies, where we keep getting emails about it. Please stop the emails. They basically are acknowledging Pauper exists, but they don't test for it at all.
And that's not surprising because they don't test for any format, but I would find it a little difficult to believe that someone in R&D at Wizards isn't like, oh, this is going to be good in Pauper, at the very least, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it could be something that, gets brought up in passing, while they're sitting around designing the EMA draft format, where it's like, oh, this is a fine card at common, and I'm sure someone in the room might
they're not unaware of Pauper,
I mean, we got a banning not that long ago, and we rarely get bannings, so I'm sure that, someone...
Two bannings, even.
Someone was like, didn't we just ban this card from Pauper? But, I don't know. So, I definitely think that, part of the issue with brewing for this format is the very, very limited amount of cards we get each set. EMA was people went nuts for that because we got 20 cards that could potentially
be played.
And
And that's not to say that they don't throw us a bone. There's generally one or two good commons in a set that have the potential to enter the format. SOI, Angelic Purge, and Thraben Inspector.
Yes, definitely. And I don't know. I think it's the fact that unlike with Legacy and the other Eternal formats, where they get access to, the rares and mythics, and those can be really splashy because they are rare and mythic, and they don't deform a limited format. they definitely get a little bit more than we do on the bone out of every set. I can't think of anything from SOI that's getting legacy play, but...
How about Nahiri?
Oh, that's 100% correct. Yeah, Nahiri's seeing legacy play now, isn't she?
Also, there's a counter-target sorcery spell that is seeing some
really?
play. I saw Andrea Mangucci played in Shardless Bug, the Delirium...
Pick the Brain?
No, I'm thinking about it's like a blue 1-drop counter-target sorcery, and then it has some Delirium text on it.
The Delirium, it searches through the rest of the deck
in
hand.
So there are some good cards in SOI, but what did we get? Oh, yeah,
we got Angelic Purge, Thraben Inspector, and like a couple other things that were sideline considerations that never really made it in. And I definitely think I acknowledge that as someone who plays brews and rogue decks. Like, there is a stagnation period after set releases where you're kind of like, I could brew something, but I've kind of looked through it all. Like, sure, there's 100 commons in this set, but like 10 were interesting, and 8 of those didn't work out, and the 2 that did just kind of slot into existing decks.
Mm-hmm.
So... I think the best period for brewing is after a Masters set, where, we get these downshifts. Or in the off chance that, a standard set downshifts some old card. I think those are the best periods to be brewing. But I definitely acknowledge that this is a tricky format to brew for. And, for example, I took a bunch of statistics courses. So, I enjoy the statistical side of Magic and, like, figuring out odds on... drawing hands and running running a Monte Carlo simulation basically to figure out like what the average hand of this deck looks like and figuring out how much redundancy I need. And I really enjoy that, but I admit that's not for everyone. Like, there are people who just want to show up and play a deck that they like, and I kind of feel like this might not be the format for that. Like, unless you're willing to sink in considerable time to like tweaking and like monitoring your wins, keeping a spreadsheet with, like your win percentage versus different decks.
Nerd.
Yeah, like, that's the thing. Like, you gotta put in work to brew in this format.
And that being said, I feel like people who would like to brew tend to be more like you. They want to be analytical about it. Because you can't just throw together a pile of cards, bomb out of an F&M, and be like, oh, I tested my deck. You know?
Yeah, no, and I've definitely... I think there's a certain disposition that leads itself well to brewing, and I know personally we've joked a little about him, but Saffron Olive on MTG Goldfish.
Oh, don't. We've never joked about him.
No. I like the guy, but I think one of the most important things every time he releases one of those Against the Odds videos where he plays some goofball deck like Slivers in Modern, or like. He has a combo deck with the Great Aurora where you like basically take your whole hand, shuffle it back in, put out a bunch of stuff, and then like swing in with like 3 Gaia's Revenge or something. Like, he plays jank, and he has described himself on I was watching a replay of a stream, and he was like, I am a purveyor of fine jank. And I think an important part of brewing in this format is like a humbleness to admit like, yeah, no, this was actually trash. I actually just built a bad deck.
And you're pretty good at admitting that when your deck is like your favorite deck is Pig Control, and even that you're like, eh.
I think that Pig Trinket is actually a very good deck. I think it's very difficult to pilot well.
For the uninitiated, this is a Sultai deck with a Trinket Mage package that plays Mike's favorite cards, which are Trinket Mage and
Silvok Lifestaff, Grim Harvest.
Yeah, Grim Harvest, and Brindlebore.
Brindlebore is not even one of my favorites.
But that's why that's why it's called Pig Trinket.
Yeah,
it's a Sultai recursion deck.
It's a brew from a Swedish player, Power T, who has clocked an immeasurable amount of hours with that deck. Because I remember at one point I contacted him when I was like first picking the deck up. I was like, "Have you considered this card?" And his answer was basically just like, "No, I have run this deck so many times. I am definite that this is the optimal 75 for this strategy." And that's the kind of thing, like, that deck, once you get the hang of it, is super tight, it plays super well, it has a few bad matchups that are very draw-dependent, but once you get the lock in place with, like, Grim Harvest and, like, cycling stuff through over and over, it's super good. And that's because some dude in Sweden has played, I think someone at some point I heard that he'd played like, I want to say 2,000 matches with the deck.
Mike knows so many cool people.
Like, it's so wild to me. Like, someone would sit there and like hone a deck to that point. I don't even do that, and like I'm committed when I have a brew on my hands.
But this is a good example. That guy invented this deck in a format where we're I'm saying that maybe that's a little more difficult, but yeah, it's doable. You just have to put in the man hours.
100%. I think a large part of it is admitting that like going into this deck could be utter garbage.
And I feel like a lot of brewers, you don't have this problem, suffer a little bit from they're a little too sensitive to be brewers. You know, they like want feedback on a deck, and then people are like, "Well, have you thought about this and this?" And they're like, "No, that's just bad. My deck is good the way it is." And it's like, "Well, why are you brewing and why are you asking for feedback?"
So I know we said we wouldn't do this 2 episodes ago, but I don't care because I don't particularly like him as a person.
No,
Travis Wu.
Travis, he's okay to not like.
Travis Wu was incredibly thin-skinned about his brews and incredibly sensitive about it. Like, I get that it's kind of like your kid, but let it go. When a brew's bad, a brew's bad. And I have so many like deck lists saved on my computer where like I tested them for like 3 weeks online, and I was just like, nope.
But he never played creatureless Aether Vials. Where the only creature is Emrakul.
Just tick it up to 15.
Yeah, tick it up to 15. That is the one Woo brew I lament that the world will never see.
He's still doing stuff. Apparently being a crypto Nazi on the internet wasn't enough for people to completely stop paying him.
Yeah.
But I think that's a very important thing. Like, going into a brew, basically saying, I am willing to admit when this is just unplayable. And moving on from that. Keep the deck list. I tell people, like, when they're talking about brewing, I'm like, always save your deck lists. Even if it's just like a 40-card sketch of a deck, hang on to it. Because later down the road, you might get that one card. You might get that one thing that just makes everything click.
And like, sort of dovetailing to that, but a little bit of switching gears, there are some cards that just haven't been fully explored yet. Like Mystical Teachings is in one deck when it could be in several decks. Like I mentioned my earlier example of Snogo. Teachings is a card that can go into a lot of different decks, but people are just, focused on playing it in this blue-black control shell.
I think that Teachings has kind of found its optimal home, but I do agree that there is still...
But it could be that one card.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the thing. Keeping, if you want to brew in this format, either find a program where you can save deck lists. I used Decked Builder, Decked DECKED.
I like that app too.
I have it on my phone. You can save your lists. You can export them as a text file.
It is not free though.
It is not free. I had credit on the App Store, and
but it is a good program.
It is a great program. It does include Masters editions and like online only printing, so it's great for Pauper in that respect. But whenever I have an idea, whenever I'm just like, going back and forth with some people about an idea for a brew, I'll sketch something down. I'll add in like 5-6 cards that I know I would want playsets of. And I leave it there. And, if it's a good enough idea, I come back to it, I tinker with it, and as soon as I've got like a loose 60, I'll like get on... I test on Cockatrice because it's free, and I don't want to spend money on cards that are obscure and might be garbage. I'll get on Cockatrice with a buddy, set up Skype so we're not talking through a text box, and then I'll just go ahead and test it. Like, be like, all right, let me see how this plays against Delver. Let me see how this plays against Mono Black. Let me see how my game is against Burn.
You never invited me to this.
If you want to get in on testing,
sure, I'll do it.
Can you play things besides Affinity?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to play Pig Control, but sure.
Yeah, no, I don't need to test against that. No one plays that deck in paper except me. I've never seen anyone else like seriously talk about that deck, and I love it because it's everything I like about Magic. It's grindy, it's graveyard, it's kind of control. Like, that's my jam. But again, just like
my approach to brewing is, will Atog and Flang fit into the deck? So.
Well, maybe you just got to figure out what other the common Atogs. Are there other common Atogs?
No. I was shaking my head. No, there are not.
Okay.
They're all uncommon.
Okay. I was going to say, maybe there's
Or
another
rare.
ATOG. But
I think a Tog is a rare.
yes. But I think, you can brew in this format. I think the important thing to realize is it's going to be very tricky.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to put in time, and you might not get there. And I think the sooner you come to an acceptance of those facts, the better time you will have brewing for Pauper. Because sometimes things just don't work.
Yeah.
And sometimes, that idea that seemed great on paper just can't be burned no matter what you do. And it's never going to be great in online play. Like, you can take it into a league, and if you run into one burn deck, you're not going to have that 5-0. So, I don't know. I think you can brew. I think it's tricky. But I want to encourage people. Like, that's the main thing. Don't get discouraged because one thing didn't work.
Ultimately very rewarding.
Kitty decks started off as a brew from one dude who just kept winning with them, and now they are like a pillar stone of our meta. So,
Pillar stone.
what?
Nothing. I just like that.
Okay, we can edit that in post.
No, keep it. We're keeping that.
Okay, but I think every deck started as a brew. Don't be discouraged. Try a brew. If it doesn't work, let it go. Like, that's the most important thing. Just a willingness to admit when you were wrong. And on that, positive, very after-school PSA note, I think we're ready to take this one on out.
Yep. Remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, please. Follow us on Twitter. You can like us on Facebook. We're also on iTunes, and if you subscribe there, please leave us a review, a good one, because it really helps us out. If you have an idea for a discussion topic or a deck list you want us to discuss, you can either use the contact form on our website or email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Also, thanks to L for the use of his music. You can find him at soundcloud.net/LLL. I'm Adrian Guarzales.
I'm Michael Petchik.
And we're signing off for Color Commentary.